or democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, they should try turning this off, as this will help with broadband width, so that at least they can be heard clearly. So welcome to all members, officers and public speakers. And here we go. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I haven't had any. I don't think you have either, Amy, have you?
I haven't, Chair. Your only committee member, I believe, who isn't with us is Councillor Hodges.
Okay, well, he may well turn up shortly.
Councillor Johnson's got his hand raised still.
I was just going to give apologies on Councillor Hodges' behalf.
Super, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ian. Okay, so minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of November. Everybody happy that I think Nick is waiting for Bobby
joining us.
Yeah. There you are.
Right.
Nick has joined us now.
Oh, that's good.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of November. Are you happy I sign these as a true record? Yes.
Moving note.
Lots of nodding heads. Thank you.
Happy.
Agenda 3 is to receive declarations. Anybody got any declarations of interest? Yes. Yeah.
Chair, just to, as I always do, I've made comments as a local member with regards to 2021-00622 FUL 8125 Holton Road, Barry. I will, of course, be looking at the that application with a clean pair of eyes, as always, Chair. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Ian. Anybody else?
No. Chair, I've got dispensation to speak on matters arising in Holton Road, but not vote, and I don't know whether that's planning applications or just retail. So to make sure, I'll
you need to declare on that. Yes.
I'll declare an interest, but then I won't vote on the application. Okay.
No, but you are retaining your right to speak. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that seems to be all the declarations of interest. So moving on to the matters on the agenda. Agenda item 5, for noting building regulations. Happy.
I think it's technically agenda item 4. Sorry, Chair, but yes, I will move a note for you.
Thank you. Agenda 5 is planning applications delegated. Agree with those?
Move a note.
I think Nick must be sat down at the goods shed. See, I recognise it. Okay, agenda item 6, appeals. Happy we note?
I'm happy to move a note, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. 7 is trees, delegated list.
Move a note, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 8 is planning applications, and the first one on our list is 2019-01386 reserved RES, sorry. It's reserved matters for the development land at East Quay. We don't have a speaker on this, and Ian is going to present it to us. So I will hand over to Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen so we can see the plans. Here we go. As you say, this is a reserved matters application for land at East Quay on Barry Waterfront. It is the last of the reserved matters for residential parcels on the waterfront, and the last section of East Quay. As you can see on the plan, members may recall, well, some time ago now, I can't remember exactly how long, we saw the first 3 parcels of East Quay, which are to the west of Corrie Way and the open space. This is a triangular parcel of land on the eastern side of Corrie Way. And the applicant in this case, rather than being one of the 3 consortium members that we're familiar with, is a housing association, United Welsh. So this is an application for a single block to provide 36 units, broadly speaking, of a similar kind of design and character and materials palette to buildings on the earlier phases. 14 of the units would be social rented apartments, and the remainder are listed as being aimed at older persons for another 14, and 7 supported units and 1 warden's unit. Access is via Corrie Way, just here where I'm indicating on the plan, leads to a kind of like a shared surface arrangement with parking on each side of it. That's probably about all I need to say for now. Thanks, Chair.
Excuse me, bit of a tickle in my throat. Thank you, Ian. Okay, anybody want to start us off on this one? Yes, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Ian Robinson, the officer, for bringing this forward. I don't know if Pam wants to go first. She's the local member, but I mean.
Yes, I do normally take them, but you beat us to it. Pam, would you like to come first?
Yes, I've seen the development. I know exactly where it is. I just drove past it again this morning to have a look at it. We badly need these one-bedroom properties for people of older, and it's not that far from the station. Okay, you would have to walk a bit, but the bus route is not brilliant, but I do think it's a good idea on this particular land.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, Ian, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Drake, the local member. I originally asked this to come to committee, I think probably around 18 months ago or so, maybe 2 years, when the first plans came forward for what's the
main application?
Yes, the original application, which was for a substantial development that was similar to that which is at Golai Caredig, sort of an extra care accommodation. I'm old enough in the tooth, to remember the discussions that we had around what made an appropriate set of accommodation for extra care, and that was really to be close to the centre of town, to be close to things that people could go and see. And I felt that application that was brought forward initially for this wasn't appropriate for that location. Councillor Drake, Councillor Collins, and myself visited the whole area as part of the general East Quay application that came forward, I think earlier this year, last year, whenever it was. And I personally feel concerned because we walked along Corrie Way. We saw the size of the vehicles that traverse Corrie Way, which are largely industrial vehicles going towards sites there. I'm concerned, and I'm not entirely sure why this parcel of land has found its way into the LDP as an area for residential development. I think that it's probably too early to bring forward this area. We have a large area that's next to it, which of course is in the shadow of the Barry biomass plant that's been built there in the last couple of years. There's a large area of land which is there, which is geared for for industrial usage, and we want to put a load of flats next to it there. I don't think, I disagree with Councillor Drake that this is appropriate until we actually bring forward, I think, a wider look for that area.
Can I just remind you that we're just doing the reserve matters. The application has been up and debated, so we're really just doing the reserve matters on this.
I think that the use of this for extra care facilities is inappropriate, Chair.
Okay, yeah, fine. Anybody else want to talk on this one? I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
I'm happy to second, Chairman Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Anybody else want to talk before I take it to a vote? Whenever you're ready. Okay, so I will ask you all, is there a consensus on this to go with officer's recommendation? Right. I will do a voting sheet now. Okay, so voting sheet at the ready, and myself for. Ben Gray?
4 officer recommendations.
Thank you. Julie Aviett?
For the recommendations.
Thank you. Rhiannon Birch?
4.
Thank you. Christine Cave?
4 officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Pam Drake?
4.
Thank you. Vince Driscoll?
Abstain, Chair.
Okay. Stuart Edwards?
4 officer recommendation.
Thank you. Nick Hodges.
Against.
Thank you, Nick. Ian, I guess, against.
Against officers' recommendations.
Thank you, Ian. Gordon Kemp.
For officer recommendation.
Gordon. Andrew Parker.
For officers' recommendation.
Thank you. Leighton Rowlands.
For, Chair.
Thank you, Leighton. Neil Thomas.
For, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Eddie Williams.
For.
Thank you very much. Mark Wilson.
For recommendations.
Thank you. And Margarita Wright.
Against, as they're not providing the school.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Okay, so it clearly goes through 3 votes against, the rest 4. Thank you very much. So we move on now to 2021-006224. Ian is going to introduce this to us then. Then we have public speakers, 3 public speakers, and then we will have a debate on it. So I will hand over to Ian and let him introduce this to us.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, to mention, we've got a couple of matters arising here. I should stress, in the case of the first one, that this is not a matters arising or a late wrap in the normal sense, in that this was actually comments that were delivered much earlier in the application. I think it's only fair I emphasise for Councillor Johnson's sake that these were provided earlier, but they, in error, weren't made part of the report. So these are a summary of the comments. They potentially raise concerns regarding the density of the development, the number of flats, possible noise generation, despite being a town centre location, waste and recycling facilities, and parking, or the absence of parking from the scheme. And we've had a second matters arising, which was received more recently, and that was from Councillor Neil Moore, on behalf of a resident who has raised concerns with Councillor Moore relating to the absence of parking from the scheme. But if I can share my screen now, and I'll bring up the plans and then go through the development. Here we go. So this is an application to convert and extend the upper floors of above 81 to 85 Halton Road in Barry to 25 affordable flats. These are the floor plans and the elevation. So the building is substantially similar to the building at present now, in particular the frontage to Halton Road. There would be amenity space provided in like a central raised courtyard area. The main issue, which I won't go into in too much detail now, the main issue for officers, I think, and in public representations, has been the absence of car parking and whether this is an acceptable type and level of development in this location without car parking. So as I said, I won't go into too much detail now, as I suspect speakers and members may wish to discuss that, and if that is the case, I can come back in more detail on the specific points raised. Just other points of note, because this isn't one of the 4 zoned housing associations, this applicant doesn't benefit from the exemption on financial contributions, which are afforded to the other 4 for schemes of up to 25 units. So if approved, this would go with the recommendation that there needs to be a legal agreement which would provide the main features being approximately 55,000 towards education, 57,000 towards sustainable transport improvements, and 67,000 towards public open space. But if it's okay with you, I'll leave it there and then come back to any further comments as and when they arise.
That's great. Thank you, Ian. Okay, so public speakers now. First on my list is Mr. Simon Williams. Mr. Williams, are you there? Can you hear us? And can we?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak this afternoon.
Yeah, you have 3 minutes to put your case. Over to you.
Okay, lovely. Well, first and foremost, myself and the residents of Newland Street that I speak on behalf of, we don't so much have an issue with the the building itself, with the proposal for the flats itself. But as somebody mentioned, it is purely down to the parking. The parking, the resident parking, the off-street, the street parking that we have in Newland Street at the moment is insufficient as it is. And from what we're aware of, that building these flats, that part of that is, the plan is to give these potential residents permits within Newland Street, and that just doesn't seem feasible at this time. It just, simple maths just doesn't add up. Newland Street is somewhere in the region of 218 metres long. You've got parking up both sides. It gives you just over 400 metres. But we've got average cars per household on Newland Street of 1.2 cars per household. And if you do the math on that, there's just not enough space already as it is for every vehicle owned on Newland Street to actually park within Newland Street. In addition to that, we've got a lot of young families within that street as well. We're talking, families of 4 or 5 with young children under the age of 5. And we just kind of feel that, if we just cannot afford to have more parking, more residence permits given to, potential future residents of Newland Street, and the danger that would bring with it to, some of the young children, as it makes it just a busier road. So that's kind of the main concerns. It's not to actually do with the development itself. We do all believe and agree that, affordable housing is very important and go for it. But the parking just does not add up, and that would be very, very problematic, and another solution needs to be found.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. You are within your time. Thank you very much for that. If you just hang on a second to see if anybody needs any points clarifying.
Of course.
I'm not getting anyone asking, so okay, I will thank you, and I will move on to, I'm not sure if Mr. Turner we've been able to contact. Is Mr. Turner there, Mr. Simon Turner?
He's not with us, I'm afraid, Chair.
Do we have
he's not attending, and I'm afraid he hasn't provided any written representations.
Okay, well, very sorry about that, Mr. Turner, but I can't really do any more about that. So the next public speaker is Mr. John Hurley. He is speaking on behalf of the applicants. Mr. Hurley, are you there and are you ready?
If I may, Chair, as well, in line with the public speaking guide, if Mr. Hurley could keep his representations to 3 minutes now, considering that we've reverted to one speaker.
Yeah.
In opposition, if that's okay with you, Mr. Hurley.
Absolutely no problem at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, members. As you will be aware, this application has been recommended for approval by officers. It will deliver, as we've heard, 25 affordable homes and an opportunity to bring back into use this prominent building and to go some way towards meeting, as quoted in the committee report, the acute housing need in Barry. The report confirms that currently on the Council's Homes for You waiting list, there are over 550 applicants in just the Butchell's ward alone. On this basis, the proposal has the full support of the Council's housing strategy team. The officer report goes on to confirm that the proposed development would involve some demolition and extension of the buildings, but as has been pointed out, it's primarily a conversion, and the usable internal floor space would overall decrease. The ground floor commercial uses would also be maintained. On this basis, consider that proposal represents a sympathetic conversion, which makes the most use of the existing building. It's also clearly pointed out in the report that there are no issues of residential amenity which would arise from the proposal, as the scheme essentially uses the existing windows of the building. The report also states, in terms of car parking, which we've just heard on, that the highway officers are actually in support of the proposals, as the site is close to a wide variety of shops, services and facilities in the town centre, and a short walking distance away from Barry Dock train station as well. It's also important to note that whilst the upper floors are not currently occupied, these could be used for an A1 retail shop without the need for planning permission, which would create its own parking demand. Anyway, as you will be aware, this is a fallback position, and it's a very relevant point to consider and a positive material consideration in terms of this parking. It's also important to note that car ownership levels are much lower for affordable housing tenants, and that's evidenced by census data. So in summary, in terms of parking, it's confirmed in the officer's report, and I quote, "There is no evidence to suggest that, in terms of traffic movements and trips, that the development would fundamentally affect traffic flows or cause additional localised congestion and or air pollution." And on this basis, the proposal accords with national and local policies in terms of parking, particularly in terms of Future Wales, which was published earlier this year, which looks to support car-free developments. So to sum up, the proposed redevelopment of the site represents a great opportunity to provide new affordable housing, which is supported by a raft of planning policies at both the national and local level, and will secure much needed affordable housing for Barry. Thank you very much for your time, members, and we would respectfully request that the application is approved in line with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. If you just hang on a second while I just confirm there are no clarifying issues with anybody. Okay, thank you very much. I will now ask Ian to respond to Mr. Williams and Mr. Hurley, or to their comments, if he has any, and then I'll open up the floor for the debate.
Sorry, Chair, could we also give Councillor Driscoll the opportunity to speak, please, before we go into debate, if that's okay?
Yes, I didn't realise that we needed to do that first, but I will do, yes.
Okay,
I'll ask Ian to give us a little response, and then we'll go to Vince first.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually happy to wait until kind of the debate, if that's easier. I feel that these are probably points which will come up again, so I'm happy to sit and wait and come back, and if that's okay with you.
Super, thank you, Ian. I'll do that. So I'll ask Vince if he would like to speak to us about this.
Not a lot to say, Chair, just that I'm glad to see these empty buildings coming of use, to be truthful. That's all I really want to put in.
Good, thank you very much, Vince. Okay, so the debate is open, and the local member, I think, is Ian. Ian Johnson. Would you like to come in, Ian?
Yes,
Sorry,
thank you,
Chair. Sorry, Councillor Johnson. I think it's what Amy was about to say as well. Is Councillor Driscoll left the meeting for the remainder of this debate?
I didn't think he had to leave it so long as he doesn't join in the vote. I'm not 100% on that, but...
I believe it's about influencing debate, having discussed it at standards committees before. But there we go. Apologies.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, Ian, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to both Mr. Hurley and Mr. Williams for their contributions there regarding the development at H125 Halton Road. I think the principle of development of housing above the Halton Road shops is a long-standing one, and not in itself one which I disagree. My concern here is that there's an overdevelopment of a constrained site, which is 25 flats, which I think the design and access statement suggests is sort of 250 per hectare. It's a small space. In fact, it's such a small space that we didn't even need to have a pre-application consultation on this, because the size of the actual land being developed was so small. We've heard, I think, the discussion regarding parking. I think that the fallback proposal that's was talked about, what if the other floors were used as for shop for A1 accommodation. I think that ignores the fact that actually the status situation of Newland Street is quite different. There are people who park there for a short space of time within the 2-hour zones. There are people who park there with residential parking permits. My understanding of the policy as it stands is that somebody who lives in a corner building is able to apply for residential parking permits on either street. This is the one which has, Newton Street is the one which has residential parking, and therefore that is that's also the entrance to the houses, and therefore that is the place that we anticipate that any car-owning residents would seek to have it. That would, I think, really tip that street over in terms of the number of cars that are available, car spaces available, bearing in mind that in most years, Newland Street is actually one of the streets which has the highest number of penalties, parking penalties given, and also is consistently rammed to the gills, particularly in the evenings. People, if it was working under A1 circumstances during the day, that fallback position would be quite different, because those people wouldn't have parking permits and would be parking further away in other locations. So that's not actually, I don't think, a particularly reliable indicator for this. In saying that, it's not just the parking that I'm concerned with here. This is a accommodation which is, I think, in a very small space at the bottom of a residential street. The town centre in Barry is busy during the day, and it very quickly quietens off as we reach evening period. This is an accommodation with, I believe, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, has one single entrance, would have around 45 to 50 people entering that, if you consider the broad range of housing that's there, and I think it has the opportunity, if I can put it like that, to become noisy, to become a centre that isn't currently there, that will create a wider impact upon the street. I would like to just comment briefly, Chair, on the importance of housing in Barry. We regularly get given a list of people on the waiting list. Apparently that's around 20% of properties in my ward seem to be on the waiting list. That didn't seem to happen last time when we talked about putting a school instead of housing at Court Road Depot. We do this council seem to pick and choose when it wants to have housing as its priority and when it doesn't. And in this case, I believe that it's, as I say, it's an overdevelopment of a constrained site. I'm not opposing housing on this site. I think that's a good idea. However, I do believe that 25 flats, 14 one-bed, 11 two-bed, 45 to 50 residents, whatever the number of cars that's additional, I think that's a lot for this location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Next on the list, I have Neil Thomas. Neil, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My ward is a similar kind of, or has similar areas in it to this, given that our town centre has a large number of commercial premises with empty flats above, and I have long urged support for bringing those flats back into residential use to try and help solve the pressure on housing that we are all experiencing. We know that the housing needs within the county, and certainly within our major towns, are desperate for some people. We do need the smaller accommodation for singles and for others. This does represent a way forward and a solution to that. Yes, within any town centre location, parking is a nightmare. It's a nightmare now, and yes, this isn't going to make it any easier. Although, given the sustainable location, hopefully there will be a lower percentage of car ownership than across the general population. It's a perennial problem. It's not one we're going to get away with. I'd like to move officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Next on the list, I have Mark Wilson. Mark.
Thank you very much. I would also like to second Neil Thomas, but I would also like to make the following observations. I feel that obviously there's been lots of issues in town centres about decline of them. We noticed that a lot of the banks are withdrawing from town centres because people are not using them. We notice a lot of shops are empty. We want people to live locally to their shops, and this is an example of it. And I feel in the future we've got to really discourage car use in town centres as much as we can, and really we need people to walk locally, to walk and to use public transport as much as possible. So for those reasons I support, but I do have every sympathy with people living nearby who've got cars, because I know there's an absolute liability, and I know it's a big issue. But I think we're going to go where a lot of other cities and towns are really car usage in the centre of towns is going to be avoided at all costs. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next on my list, I have Christine Kay. Christine, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been listening to the debate, and I'm particularly concerned about the use of the site and its impact on parking and the well-being of residents, really. I recently spoke to our local PCSO, who informed me that during the August bank holiday, the majority of their call-outs were in respect of neighbourhood disputes, in particular neighbourhood disputes over parking. And I do think as a committee, we should bear this in mind, that an increase in or difficulty in parking often results in neighbourly or residents' disputes. And so we're sort of pushing our problems, and we do have obviously a long waiting list, as Councillor Johnson points out, but we're actually pushing our problems onto the police, and that can never be right. So I am very concerned that there does appear to be, and I'm sure Ian will address this shortly, there does appear to be a big problem here with parking. No one has come forward, not our speakers or our officers, because they haven't spoken yet, but nobody has come forward and come up with a solution to the parking. But I'm just wondering if Ian will do that now. I'm
sure Ian will. Thank you, Christine. I think we've got two more speakers on this, and I'll let Ian come in and sum up. But I think those of us that have been on planning committee for quite some time know what Ian is going to tell us about Planning Policy Wales and parking. But next on my list is Councillor Gray. Ben Gray, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I've listened to the debate, and I certainly understand the issues being raised. I also appreciate the nature of this committee as a quasi-judicial committee. I need to look at what's gone before and precedent around certain areas when it comes to parking, and I know that the arguments around parking and the way they are portrayed and discussed and understood locally are at odds with the policies that were referred to by the agent in the public speaking and briefly by the officer, and certainly mentioned in the report. But it is clear a sustainable location in a city centre location, a town centre location, apologies, and this sort of development doesn't have the requirement for parking that just in case we could turn it down on that grounds, on planning grounds. So I reluctantly understanding those situations with parking, but I support officer recommendations. I do want to see these units built. I do think it's a good development in that regard. As to the other comment, likening to Court Road, I think that's a bit of a straw man. I'm afraid. We don't choose what applications come before us. This is a housing association. We've already had it noted. It's not one of the four that has the relationship where there will be a change in what's provided. This isn't a site that the council had available to decide to put a school on it. So that was a bit of a side swipe, which wasn't necessarily part of this debate. So I'm going to happy to support officer recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Andrew Parker next. Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have studied the plans, and obviously, if there was a move to try and reduce the density by, say, 5 units or so, it would become an impractical scheme. All these properties have a problem. You've got to retain the glazing. So the building itself almost dictates the number. And I think if you look at the plans, it's a very, very worthwhile scheme, and I certainly will support it.
Thank you, Andrew. Ian, as you've had a go, do you mind if I let Nick come in, and then I'll come to you after Nick's had a go? So, Nick, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think what we're discussing here really is not only an overdevelopment, but also the future of our town centre. It's very nice for Penarth members to tell us that it's fine and dandy for Barry, but if we're serious about actually making Barry a decent place to shop and trade in, to have an overdevelopment like this in the centre of our town centre without adequate parking is a death knell to the future, if any plans this council wants to bring forward. Court Road, of course, was a Vale of Glamorgan scheme, so I think it's very relevant what comes before us. I can't support this, Chairman. It's overdevelopment. It's too big, and I'm sorry, it's not right.
No, thank you, Nick. Okay, so Ian, if you would like to come back in, and then I will ask Ian Robertson to respond.
Very, very briefly, Chair, I just want to make 2 points. One is that if this application is agreed by the committee tonight, that we do look at the parking on Newland Street and look if there's a way to extend the amount of residents parking there as opposed to shoppers parking. You need to consider that within the wider context. But if we are, if our policies on this mean that, in effect, any car owner in the proposed development would be taking up a space on Newland Street, then we need to consider whether there's an ability to introduce more spaces for residents in the Newland Street area, because currently it's a mixture of 2-hour shoppers and residential parking. So I think that needs to be considered. Second point is more a process point, which is that as part of our papers, we receive copies from the housing department of the number of people on waiting lists. I think it would be helpful for development in future. I think I've made this point before, that it would be helpful to break those down to see how many of those are on gold/silver/bronze and how many of those needs are actually met by the development that are being put before us. Because I do wonder on a wider scale whether we are seeing a large number of people who are on perhaps bronze, not to dismiss their needs as well, but whether we are actually meeting the needs of gold and silver residents when we're actually having these developments, or whether largely they are simply flats that are available for anybody in reality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I have got Mark and Neil wanting to come back in. So I'm going to draw a line then and let Ian Robinson respond. Sorry, Ian. So Mark Wilson first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to respond to what Councillor Johnson said about the parking. I totally agree. And if we can support this application with that proviso to re-looking at the parking, if possible, as one of our possible conditions. Whether that's possible, I don't know. But I think we should have a look at that, because obviously the residents around there have got obviously a big case in point. They live there. We want to make sure they're not too inconvenienced by this issue, and I think that is almost a halfway. In terms of housing, yes, it would be good to see which banding is there, but I can tell you, I know in Penarth, people even with Gold Band Plus are really struggling with housing and trying to get any housing at all. So I'm more than happy to support that, what you're saying, Ian. But I would think, I know from a Penarth perspective here that, even people in Gold Plus are finding it really difficult to find any housing at all. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Neil, if you would like to come in quickly, and then we'll ask Ian to...
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, as Councillor Hodges, I think, misunderstood what I said. He said that it was all right for Penarth councillors to advocate this in Barry and not here. What I was saying was the exact opposite of that, and that I would like to see similar consideration of development of flats and whatever above our commercial properties as well, as that is desperately needed. As Mark has just said, we do have problems across the county, but including in Penarth, of people quite high on the housing waiting list who can't find properties. So yes, I continue to support this.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ian, we've had a reasonably decent debate on this. Would you like to respond to the members, please?
Yes, Chair, happy to. Well, I'll try and keep it brief, but there's quite a lot of points made, so I'll try and meet as many of them as I can and keep it brief. It doesn't feel like there's a much aversion to the concept of residential use above the floors, above the ground floor, possibly more so the number. Car parking levels with units of this size are evidenced to be very low, in the region of 0.4 cars per unit, and in a location like this, it could even be lower. So the question we have in respect of density is, well, okay, if you halved the development and had 12 units, would that make a significant difference to parking, or would it make a couple of car parking spaces difference, but actually having halved the number of affordable units you're providing? So from my perspective, I don't feel that making a significant difference to the number of units would have a knock-on significant effect in terms of the parking demand. Policy-wise, it's long been in Vale policy, SPG, and planning policy Wales about trying to reduce car use and not promote higher levels of car parking. Now in Future Wales, which is development plan, it holds more weight than planning policy Wales and SPG. Future Wales says councils must act to reduce parking and support car-free developments in accessible locations. That is a significantly stronger emphasis than we've seen previously. So that's how policy is developed, and that's the policy context that we have to make this decision within. It's probably relevant to draw a little bit of context with another similar, and I'll draw the similarities and differences between this case and this other case I'm going to refer to, but it's worth referring to as context the United Reformed Church application, which came before committee, which was another car-free development, which was refused, but then the appeal was successful, and the planning inspector very heavily relied on the direction of planning policy and the merit to be given to schemes and sustainable locations. Now, in that case, parking pressures possibly not quite as great as here, albeit I would say the location was less sustainable than here, and they were market units. So what we have here is a very, very sustainable development right in the town centre location. So I think it's any kind of in principle arguments that we could look to from previous comparable as far as possible cases, I think would support the approval of the application. Coming to Newland Street, it's evident, and there's no getting away from the fact that it's heavily parked. And what I obviously can't do is say, I can't put my hand on my heart and say that approving this development would mean that any parking need could comfortably be met within the bounds of Newland Street, because that is highly unlikely to be the case. What we have to consider is that 25 units are, based on the evidence before us, likely to result in somewhere, I would guess, between 7 and 10 parking spaces if you look at 0.4, maybe a bit less. Now, that is likely to have an impact to some degree on the parking habits of residents on Newland Street. Now, in my opinion, that is likely to be inconvenience, not to a significant degree, to a not significant number of residents every day. That's not to say that residents won't have perhaps a slightly more difficult job in parking than is the case currently, but based on site visits that I've done and the case officer has done at different times of the day, there is some parking in the wider vicinity, even if that's not Newland Street. But in coming to a balanced conclusion on the assessment, what we have to look at is whether that impact outweighs not providing 25 affordable units for small households that need them. And the question is, what outweighs the other? And in this case, we as officers feel we can't escape the conclusion that the affordable housing need outweighs the knock-on effect in parking, which is inescapable, but we don't believe is such a fundamentally harmful impact that planning permission should be refused. Affordable developments in highly sustainable locations like this are generally held to be acceptable in principle. And if we're going to dismiss affordable developments of this kind in this kind of location, all that does is push pressure on edge of settlement locations, greenfield locations. We really have to be making best use of the sustainable sites like this. So in summary, we feel that the benefits outweigh the harm, but that is not to dismiss or ignore or the knock-on effects that would be there. They are fully appreciated, and we do sympathise with residents that would experience those knock-on effects. But I think in this case they're unavoidable and not so demonstrably harmful that the planning permission should be refused for highly needed housing.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, so we've given this a good debate. I will now ask you for your votes. We've had it moved and seconded for officer's recommendation. I will vote for officer's recommendation, and I will ask Councillor Gray.
For officer recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Aviat.
For.
Councillor Bird.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kay.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Drake.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
You asked me, John.
I did, Stuart. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't think I was. Yeah, 4. Sorry, recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hodges.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Parker.
4 officers' recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
4.
And Councillor Wright.
Against.
Thank you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 against, and all the others 4. Clearly goes with officer's recommendation. Thank you for that. I thank our speakers. We will now move on to the next application, which is T. Kerrig. There are late reps, or whatever we call them these days, and there is a speaker on this. And I believe Vicky is going to lead us through this application.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this application, it's as the report indicates, we have a retrospective planning application for a fence, a 5-foot feather edge fence to be erected as described in the application behind an existing retaining wall. As the report sets out, the retrospective nature of the application, the works to generate the retaining wall themselves are considered to be an engineering operation, and the retaining wall itself requiring planning permission. You'll note that the officer's recommendation is that the application be refused and that enforcement action be taken to remove the breach of planning permission. Two key issues, which I'm sure we'll come on to hear a bit more about. One is the highway safety impact of the works which have affected the visibility display at the junction, and the other are the visual impact of the works that have taken place. I'm sure members will have seen from the site photos that have been circulated, and also from the report, the nature of the enclosure. I might just try and share my screen as a reminder. Let's hope I do this properly now. Can you all see the officer's report I have on the screen?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So these photos really demonstrate the works that have taken place. So you can see a sort of rendered wall along the frontage of the property, and then some fence posts have been erected in the area where obviously the fence is proposed in the application. I should say at this point you will have referred to the Matters Arising report, where the applicant has indicated a willingness to amend those plans to try and address the highway issues. In other words, to set that fence back and to lower the height of the retaining wall to try and address the visibility issues. So we'll come on to that. But just as far as the application as it stands at present in front of you, having not been formally amended yet, this is the proposal that you can see. And if I just scroll down a little bit, this plan shows you the extent of the adopted highway in the vicinity, and the photo on the right hand side shows you the impact that the development has had in terms of the visibility display at that junction. And I believe there are photos in this report, forgive me as I scroll through. Yes, this photograph here is an indication of what the site looked like before these works were carried out. So obviously there was a sloping highway verge, and then the hedgerow which was set back. You can see the telegraph pole there in that photograph at the edge of the hedgerow, which if you refer to the sort of works that have been carried out, that's now enclosed within the site. I'll stop sharing my screen, and So yeah, as I've indicated, the key issues being the highway visibility and the visual impact of that development. If we start with the highway impact, you'll note from the officer's report that the Highway Authority have objected in terms of the impacts on the visibility at the junction. We've also had concerns raised from local residents about the impact on them from that access, and concerns about highway safety because of the implications. I'm sure our speaker, who I believe is the applicant, will indicate as the matters arising notes that she's willing to amend the plans to address that issue. I would still advocate the officer's recommendation as written in the report, because the highway safety issue is not the only concern that we have, and of equal concern in terms of the acceptability of the application is the visual impact of the development. And we feel that in this very rural context, where we're surrounded by sort of fields and countryside and hedgerows, and whilst there are dwellings nearby, you know, most of those have a similar sort of countryside feel. We feel that a sort of featherboard fence, you know, at this height above the retaining wall has had a really detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the site in that sort of rural context. It would serve to very much domesticate the appearance of the site on a prominent junction. You know, we're surrounded by countryside, so we feel even the works to potentially address the highway issues would not address our concerns in terms of the visual impact of the development. And so I would advocate sticking with the recommendation as submitted in the report. But obviously we'll hear from the applicant and what they have to say, and members may want to debate that issue a bit further. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Okay, as I said, we have the applicant, Miss Caroline Jones, coming to speak to us. Miss Jones, are you there?
I am here. Afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, councillors. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see.
Oh, that's good. I'm not very au fait with things like this. So thanks for the opportunity to have a conversation about this. I think that there's a few just thanks to, I can't see the name of the lady, Victoria, that was just talking there. It's not a retrospective planning application with regards to the wall. I've been in contact with the planning department right the way through, as I'll explain now too, and it was okay. They've even been out and measured the wall, told me that it was absolutely fine. So there was no issue right the way through with regards to the wall. It was just the fence, as far as I understand it. So I just wanted to just correct there, or just to sort of, just make a note that it's not retrospective planning that we're applying for with regards to the wall. It's the wall itself has actually been rebuilt because it was failing and crumbling. The picture that you actually showed is a very old archive picture. That's not how the place looked. And that picture is, I believe, at least 13 years old. The place was derelict and it didn't look like that. That's an old picture that's been given to you by the one single resident that's complained about this, who's well known to the planning committee for previously complaining about things, and that's just after it had all been completely pared back. But I'll chat to you guys about that. It's interesting, the sort of the viewpoints that I'm noting on this. This is very surprising to me, because I've literally been in contact with the planning right the way through from start to finish. And to say now, and I've been told on numerous occasions, there's not a problem with the wall. It's that the fence is, the proposed fence is 5 foot. And apparently, because it's roadside, I needed to apply for planning, which I did the same day. So I've actually, because I'm not used to public speaking, I've made some, just a few notes and some underpinning information that are pertinent to this particular issue, and it's also relevant to the localized area. You're saying that it's very rural, but it's pretty standard in this area. And again, I've provided numerous photos to show within a 1/4 mile radius within the planning application that a wall with a feather edge fence on top of it is pretty standard, including the private road that literally is about 300 or 400 yards a little bit further down, maybe 600 yards a little bit further down, that has the feather edge fencing running right the way along it with a decreased visibility splay than the current one that I've actually put forward. So that's some underpinning information. So the property itself was derelict. It was purchased by myself just over a year ago, and it was in need of a full renovation. So one of the jobs that
That's 3 minutes, Chair.
Miss Jones, that is.
Oh, I didn't realise that I had my 3 minutes. I thought that I was just chatting with you before.
I'm sorry. It is a 3 minute.
Oh
slot.
dear, I didn't realise I'd started. I apologise. Okay, I understand. I didn't get a chance.
Hang on there now.
Apologies, I didn't realise.
Any clarification points needed? Andrew Parker, would you like to make your
just by way of clarification, to Victoria and also to the applicant, is the telegraph pole on the land forming part of the application, or is it actually on highway land? I'm curious as to know where the highway boundary is.
Yeah, I can clarify that for you if you'd like. The land is actually owned by myself, as per the planning, as per the information that I've already forwarded. I'm having the telegraph pole removed by British Telecom after their full investigation into it, where they found that in the localised area, the Vale of Glamorgan had actually produced a.
Miss Jones, you've clarified what we need.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, it's on my ground, and the telegraph pole is being removed.
Fine. That's very kind. Thank you very much for that.
If there are no more points of clarification, then Miss Jones, could I ask you to mute and turn your camera off, please?
Okay.
I would make a comment on what you said. If planning permission is not granted for something and an application comes in and it's already been built, surely that is retrospective. Vicky, would you?
Yeah, I'm slightly confused by some of those comments, I must admit. Members will be familiar with permitted development rights, which include that you can build an enclosure of up to 1 metre next to a highway. However, engineering operations do require planning permission. So if you're raising or lowering ground level as part of the erection of an enclosure, it wouldn't be covered by those permitted development rights. Now, I'm slightly confused by the comments made, and I will take that up separately with the applicant about what conversations have been had throughout this process, if there's been any confusion about that. But I'm clear that the works that have taken place in terms of raising the ground level are akin to engineering works that need planning permission, and hence the recommendation to committee that not only the works in the planning application are refused, but that all the works that require planning permission that are considered to be unacceptable are tackled through the service of an enforcement notice, and that's the recommendation that's before you. Now, I would have expected.
Vic, can I just ask you to stop a minute? Miss Jones, you need to turn your camera off, please.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, over to you now.
No problem. I would have expected us to pick up a bit more on the late reps. I was expecting the applicant to refer to them, and I appreciate she may not have had time to do so. But as I alluded to in my introduction, there's been an indication that she's wanting to amend the plans to try and address the highways issues. So really, I think the planning committee need to consider whether or not you would be minded to defer the matter to resolve that, and to offer the opportunity to amend the plans to try and resolve that. As I said in my introduction, I don't think that will make the development acceptable in planning terms, because we're concerned about the visual impact of the development regardless. So my recommendation to you would stand as per in the officer's report, but I just wanted to sort of make you aware that were you minded to sort of address that part of it, then that's the way that you would need to move an amendment to the recommendation.
Super, thank you, Vicky. I noticed in the report there's no comment from the local member either, but we've got 4 members wanting to speak. The first of them is Ben. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. I mean, we've talked previously at the Planning Committee with regards to these sorts of applications, and sometimes I appreciate the terminology around the words retrospective can be, interpreted different ways by members of the public. But we had front boundary fences and so forth, where we stuck with our enforcement action, or to allow officers to then negotiate and so forth. So I'm happy to move off to recommendations. I believe some of the conversations around whether there are other plans or whether there is other action that may be taken to resolve the issues at hand can be taken up then by officers, and maybe Vicky can come back to confirm whether that's the case. Certainly it has been on previous applications, so that's why I'd move off to recommendations. I'd also state, I mean, as a committee, we have seen and approved the guide to public speakers, and I understand that democratic services support members of the public in speaking at committee, and I just just wanted assurance that all those things took place with regard to our public speaker this time. It is obviously a different space and environment, and sometimes you feel like you're entering into a conversation, and it is a shame that we weren't able to hear the salient points perhaps around the case, rather than just the rebuttal of what was said by the officer. But I believe, having looked at the whole report, whether or not the archiving pictures and all the other points that were made were there, I believe that can be resolved by officers. Sorry, somebody's not muted. I'm hearing myself back again. Can be resolved by officers in the process were we to give this officer recommendations position. So that's why I move officer recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Next on the list is Mark Wilson. Mark, would you like to give us your thoughts?
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to second officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Mark. Anything else? No? Okay. Andrew Parker, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to second it, but my main concern at the moment is I'm fully aware of that junction because I do live fairly close to it. The partial fence that has been erected at the moment undoubtedly will cause visibility problems from people coming along the lane from the west. There are several houses down there, and there are actually stable blocks, and it is heavily used. So I agree totally with Victoria Robinson's view that it should be refused, and enforcement action needs to be taken very quickly to protect the residents using the lane which comes in from the west.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Neil Thomas. Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, it's a question that Ben raised just now. I just wanted to confirm explicitly that us supporting officers' recommendations will give officers the opportunity to go back to Ms. Jones and renegotiate and reconsider what is available and what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, to give her a chance to modify her application, and that if she then declines to do that in line with our officers' recommendations for that property, then the enforcement action can be put into action. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the position, well, I know the position is that if a refusal is given, they have a free option of a planning application, which is where then the negotiation on what should be there and shouldn't be there takes place. But Vicky, I'm sure you'll put it much more eloquently than I can.
Yeah, you're spot on, Chair. So if members go with officer recommendation this evening, the planning application itself would be refused. So firstly, they would have a right of appeal against that refusal as it stands, or they would have the opportunity to resubmit an amended application. Certainly, they've indicated that that would be what they would want to do to overcome the highway concerns. The authorisation would also give us authorisation to serve an enforcement notice. We could do that straight away, but given the indication here that we're expecting some amendments, we would usually hang fire to sort of see where that takes us and give just an opportunity to amend the scheme to come up with something acceptable. As I've said, to my mind at this stage, what's being proposed to simply move the fence back by a couple of feet is not going to be sufficient to overcome our concerns about the visual impact of the fence. So, we wouldn't be advocating that being the absolute solution here. But if other proposals were put forward, there may well be an acceptable solution here. Clearly, there was a very nice hedgerow there previously. That sort of a proposal we would welcome, the reinstatement of that kind of enclosure in the form of a hedge. So, yeah, we can look at that. But the going with officer recommendation this evening would give us the armoury to sort of take action if that doesn't lead us anywhere.
Lovely, thank you, Vicky. Just a quick one, Amy. Could you just confirm that Miss Jones has, she had full communication with yourselves, and that she had been told about the protocols and whatever?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Miss Jones had confirmation of her registration being received, where she received the public speaking guide. She also then had a subsequent email once the window for registrations closed to confirm that she had 3 minutes of speaking time, and she was offered a Teams trial in advance of the meeting tonight, which myself and Miss Jones conducted earlier on today.
Super, thank you, Amy. I thought that was the case, but I just had to confirm. Okay, so we've had it moved and seconded. It's the movement was for officer's recommendation. I don't see any other hands up, so I will start the vote off, and I will say I'm voting for officer's recommendation.
Do we have any dissent, Chair? Sorry, I didn't hear. Do we have any dissent in the room to need to go through the roll call?
Any dissent? Anybody not going to go with officer's recommendation? 3, 2, 1, and unanimous. Thank you. Okay, that was simple. I was expecting a vote on that one, so I can get rid of that sheet. That moves us on to the last one on our agenda, which is Calcott Health Clinic, Winston Road, Barry. It's a Reg 3. Ian is going to run us through the application. There are no late reps and there are no speakers on it. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Share my screen if I may. Okay, so this is an application for the demolition of the former health clinic, which the through Health Board reorganisation. Sorry, I should say through the reorganisation of Health Board, the provision of Health Board care means it's no longer required by them. So the application is for the demolition of the building and the construction of a new 3-storey building to provide 12 affordable flats. There's the site location plan, and that shows the footprint of the building. It's a relatively mixed street scene, containing buildings of kind of varying scale and design. The building proposed is quite contemporary in appearance. It's flat roofed with a kind of modern cladding system throughout, with some balconies and, of note, a green wall to the front of it. It will be served by 12 parking spaces. I'll show on the layout here, which would be, in officers' views, at least enough to serve the development and visitors. Areas of outdoor amenity space. That's probably all there is to say, really, other than this is, I believe, a continuation of the excellent work being done by Andrew Freegard and his team. We've seen other developments in Barry, Brecon Court and Homeview, to name a few. So if approved, hopefully this will be the next step in an excellent house building programme over the last few years.
Good, thank you, Ian, very much indeed. Okay, we will open the debate up, and now, I'm not quite sure, Leighton, I think you might be the local member actually on this as well. Is your hand up?
It is, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's not showing hand up for some strange reason, but it is now. That's okay. Over to you, Leighton.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I've had a look at, obviously, this application, and obviously residents have had a look, and we sort of feel that it's an overdevelopment of the site, and it doesn't really fit in with the surrounding area. I don't know if members of the planning committee know the Calcott estate that well, but it's it doesn't really fit in, and also the traffic along that particular road, especially around school time, in relation to, because you've got Colcott School, but you've also got Whitmore and Pencoitra School, and residents and myself feel that with this development would have an effect on the traffic, especially coming out of that road, Keats Way. I'm not going to keep the planning committee any longer. I just want to say that we feel that it contradicts policy MD2, in particular 1. It doesn't fit in with the surrounding area. 6, it has an impact on the highway and exacerbates the existing traffic, but also policy MD5, in particular 3 and 6. But I'll let other members have a view, and we'll see where the debate goes.
Thank you, Leighton. Next on my list, I have Andrew Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I would move officer's recommendation. Looking at the scheme, it is quite refreshing to see good quality modern design coming in at this stage, rather than the pastiche of everything that we quite often see. Having listened to the previous one on car parking, full marks that you've got 12 parking spaces, but more importantly, they've got some very good disabled parking spaces. So very happy to recommend officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Gray. Ben, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was looking at the report, and I noticed under consultations, page 79, Barry Town Council made no objections, and forgive me, they're not normally shy in coming forward if they have an objection to something. There were only 4 resident objections put forwards. I think this is a sustainable site. You look at the things like parking demand and usage of a former medical centre. I think it's well within development proposals, and it's well set out by the Vales Highway Department on page 79 as well. So I'd second those officer recommendations.
Lovely, thank you very much. If there is nobody else wanting to talk on this, I will go straight to the vote, and I don't think we're going to get dissent on it. So I am happy to vote for officer's recommendation. Councillor Gray.
4 officer recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Aviott.
4 recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Birch.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cave.
4 officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Drake.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
4, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Rowlands.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
4.
Councillor Wright.
Against.
Thank you. Okay, so that's 3 against, everybody else 4, clearly carried. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I thank you all. I thank our officers.
Chairman, if I may, just for the sake of the minutes and the recording, I'd just like to confirm that Councillor Driscoll did rejoin us for the T. Kerrig application, but due to technical difficulties, he did not hear the full debate, and therefore the vote that went on dissent was not considering Councillor Driscoll's vote.
Okay, thank you, Amy, for making that clear. It doesn't make any difference, but for the record, it needs to be stated, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming and for your patience. Thank you to our officers. I probably won't see a lot of you now before Christmas, so I'll wish you all a happy Christmas.
And to you, Chairman.
Season's greetings.
Yeah. Happy Christmas.
Good night all. Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Cheers.
Good night.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Happy Christmas, everybody.
Stay well, stay safe.
Mm.